This is part 2 in our 2-part series. I don't think I'm going to have 3 parts to this. And this is on how to extend the roof overhang. So we're going to focus on this corner and extending the gable end fascia board in this video. First thing you're going to need to do is remove the fascia board and then some of the sheathing so that you can access the rafters. And if you think you can do some of this work from inside, knock yourself out. Seems like it would be easier to do it above, and by the time you're done watching the video, you might share the same opinion. So let's go to the corner here. There are going to be at least 2 ways you can do this. One will be to add another rafter extension, whatever you use on whatever you used here, whether it's 2x4, 2x6, whatever. Now here's what I'm referring to. We have a rafter here that we've nailed on the side, and the corner might not work all the time, but you can always cut something like this, and I hope this makes sense, because this is going to be the end of the wall. If you have siding coming up this wall, you could have siding going all the way up to the top, and this might be hard to finish this corner, so you might need to move it over. But this is one way here. Take a look at the bottom view. You just miter this would obviously be very hard to cut. And you could always do this out of one piece of wood, just have a piece of wood coming down without a miter, and, depending upon how you want it to finish. Now here's the other way you could do it, and this would be, instead of nailing a rafter on the side, you would simply add one on to the end. Now this would not have any structural strength. The only way you're going to get any structural strength is to fasten it to another rafter, and I guess that's firmly attached to the building. So this right here could actually work. Your fascia board here would need to go back at least 10 feet, I would imagine. If it was, if you had an overhang of about 1 foot or 2 this way, a 1 foot overhang on the end of a gable is real common. If it's 16 inches, I still think that would work. And then, of course, if you could have a long overhang coming down this way, because you're going to be able to get some structural support for the rafter on this side of the gable that's going to be extending past the wall by, again, 1 foot to 18 inches, let's just say. And this between the support from this piece of fascia board and the support from this piece of fascia board, as long as it's at least 10 foot minimum from the corner in each direction, you do not want to have a small piece. You don't want to have the last piece of fascia board stop here and then have like a little 3 or 4 foot piece. You're not going to get any strength out of it. If you do something like this, you're going to need to get strength from the 2 pieces of fascia board here going in each direction. In order to have the fascia board extend past, you're going to need some type of structural support, and we often refer to these as outlookers in the framing industry. You might call them something else, but they're basically 2x4s, and you could use 2x6s if you want. We use 2x4s, and we space them 32 inches on center. They'll be 32 inches away from the other board. And that center to center, remember, is from edge, would be the left edge to the left edge, or the center of the board to the center of the board. And you will simply notch them into the edge rafter and then put 2 end nails in from the rafter into the outlooker. This is what the notch would look like in the rafter here. And if this is a truss, you have a 2x4 truss, you're probably thinking, I'm going to cut too much of the truss out. Well, it's a gable end truss. You're probably going to be okay. But remember, this is not structural engineering advice. I'm just kind of throwing this stuff out there to give you examples of things that you can do. Some of the information in these videos might not work for your specific project, and you need to keep that in mind. After you have the outlookers installed, you can cut them to size and install the fascia board. And here you can see it is extending past. We now have a fascia board with a roof overhang or a roof overhang attached to our home now. So and hopefully this makes sense. You can see what I'm talking about in the previous one. If you need to have at least 10 feet if you're not going to use this method here, and you're going to just cut a small board to be even or flush with the edge of the rafter here. You need at least to have a fascia board that's 10 foot in each direction from the break. And I'd like to see it even longer, especially on this side. And then this way you could use this part of the overhang, the fascia board, to give you the structural strength instead of the roof rafter. And I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, don't forget, leave a comment or your questions in the comment area, and I will answer them as soon as possible. This is just a look at the bottom of the overhang. Sometimes I miss putting pictures in here, and I think, heck, they should have put another picture in there. So if I have too many in there, that hopefully you understand why. There is the overhang, and there's another view of the fascia board, how it would connect to the rafters. Here's something else you might need to take into consideration, and hopefully you watch this video before you put the blocks in, as I suggested in the other video. Sometimes you need to shape the top of the block in order to have a perimeter nailing, which would provide you with a building perimeter nailing, which would be where the walls are, not the fascia board, not the edge of the fascia board. That won't be considered the perimeter. I should say in some cases it might be, but the nailing I'm talking about, it might not be. So you would simply put a block that would have an angle, the angle of your roof. If you have a 22-degree pitch on your roof, you would simply put a 22-degree cut on the blocks, and that would provide you with a nice surface that you could nail to. This section of the video will provide you with a better idea of what I'm talking about. The perimeter nailing, and that's sometimes, in some cases, the most common nailing is going to be 6 inches on center nails, and if it's half-inch plywood, that would be an 8D nail. And you would simply space them 6 inches on center. Don't forget that the perimeter or the edge of the plywood will also need to be nailed at 6 inches on center. And again, I'm providing you with this information, but it might not work for your project. Different types of roofs and structures require different nailing spaces, different nailing schedules. So just trying to point out in this particular section of the video what the perimeter nailing is. And this actually gives you the strength. It uses the roof to strengthen up the outside walls. And keep in mind, the exterior walls, when they're strong, it gives you a nice tight fit for the building. It also secures the interior walls in most cases. So here again, the blocks, you would need to nail into these blocks here to get a perimeter nailing. And again, I'm just kind of throwing this out there as another part of the video to give you a little more information on something that you would need to do or might need to do. Now, you would also need to nail the perimeter of the plywood. So you would need to have it, in this case, if you had a situation like this where it broke half on these blocks, then you would need to nail this at 6 inches on center also. Now, you could always break the plywood back on the center of the block and then nail the plywood 6 inches on center, or whatever the nailing schedule is recommended, onto the block. And then the other part of if you had plywood you were using again, or 1x6 shiplap, tongue and groove, then you would nail that 6 inches on center over here also, even though for experienced carpenters out there, you know that when you start nailing 1x6, it usually splits and doesn't really make a lot of sense, even though the engineers point that out that they want it done. So sometimes you need to keep in mind that the engineers are using their formulas or using stuff that they're familiar with, but they don't like to see the wood split, and in some cases they might need to be notified to make sure that they might be able to provide you with another alternative, even though as construction workers, we usually don't want to wait for that information. We just nail it off and off we go. Sometimes it's not always the best thing. Anyway, that's it for this video. Hope it helps. This was a response to a question someone sent me. And if you have any questions about things that I can help you with, feel free to ask. If I can help, I will.